Hi, this is a tutorial on how to make a ceramic mask that you would make in clay, and the idea is that it hangs on the wall. So the first thing you want to do is figure out what you want to make. We call this the envisioning process, where you're thinking about what it is you want to have. Is it a human form? Is it an animal form? Is it a combination of different things? Is it an abstract form? And it's useful to look at a bunch of different sources. You can look at books, internet sources. For example, I was thinking about doing some sort of a goat-like creature. So having a picture of a goat, maybe a front view, maybe a side or profile view is very helpful. And then in your sketchbook, start off with sort of your envisioning, like what is it that you want to make. This really helps you because it kind of gives you the idea of where you're going. If you start off with a really good plan, you end up with a better end product. Okay, so once you have that, and that's going to take you several days to probably figure out exactly what you want to do, you want to start to create the form. This is a form that I made last year, kind of a lion-shaped form. And what I really encourage students to do is to try to create something three-dimensional. So in other words, you really want something to protrude or pop out of the mask, because the idea is that when it hangs on the wall, some part of it will pop out. And that's the idea when you look at the profile. So when you're looking at the profile, you want to think about, if it's a lion, it has a muzzle. If it's a human, maybe it has cheeks and maybe it has a chin. And you want to kind of think about that. When you make the mask, you're going to make a hanging device, which is a piece of clay that's going to be on the back, and that'll allow you to hang it on the wall. And I like this because I like to have just a whole series of masks up on the wall that are made out of clay. The first part we're going to do now, we have our vision of what we'd like to do, and we're going to take that and we're going to go from this into our negative form. So for the negative form, we're going to use newspaper. I have a stack of newspaper here, and you want to kind of think about what it is that whatever human, animal, or whatever form you're making is going to look like. So I generally start to sculpt the paper. Okay, so if you look at any of these masks, you're thinking about like what part of the face is going to be coming out. So since I'm kind of making a sort of a goat-like mask, I know that the goat has a very long snout or nose or muzzle or what do you want to call it. And so I'm going to start to create that part of the form. Okay? So this is going to be sort of the negative part of the form, and then what we'll do is we'll build the clay up on top of that. I usually want to make sure that the newspaper is fairly compressed because that kind of gives you enough stability to hold the clay. And it's a temporary thing. The newspaper is the negative form. Once you put the clay on there, that newspaper is not going to stay there that long. So I've got kind of the muzzle. I want to add a part up here that's going to be the head. Okay, so again, I'm sculpting in the paper. And I try to not use too much tape. You can use tape, but you don't really need that much. It's mostly your amount of paper, and then you combine those together. So once you kind of know where you're at, get a big piece of newspaper, and you're going to cover that whole thing over. Okay, I like to kind of just roll it. So something like that is nice. And then I usually have some brown craft paper around. This is stuff, a lot of times they'll send it when you're sending a package or something. I always save that stuff. It's great for sculpting with and creating sculptures with. Okay, so I'm using some of that brown craft paper. And piece. Okay. And here you have a basic negative form. Okay. Now I might want to work a little bit on the pointiness of that, but I'm going to take a piece of tape now, and you notice that's the first piece of tape I've used. I didn't need a lot of tape. It's just about thinking about the form primarily. Once I have this kind of connected, I may decide to add more parts, just depending on what I'm doing. All right, so here we are. Here's our negative form. And I want to think about like how I'm going to build that up and create the goat form next. All right, so the next step is that we're going to go ahead and roll out our slab for our clay. Slab is a rolled out piece of clay. You can use a rolling pin or you can use a slab roller. I'm using Orient Stoneware. It's a Clay Planet product, which is nice. It has grog in it. It makes it nice and sturdy, and I like it for sculpture. You're going to want to cut some pieces. I like to use the wire clay cutter and cut kind of like a 3/4 inch to 1 inch size pieces so that it just makes it easier to roll it out on the slab roller. I have cut 4 pieces and I'm kind of pounding them together. What you're going to realize is the slab roller is going to kind of extend it one way. So you want to think about setting it up in the correct position. Now our slab roller is kind of old, but it still works pretty well. You basically want to put the 2 canvas sides touching the clay and the other rubber side not. On our slab roller, what you do, you have 2 guides on either side. You're going to unroll it to about maybe an inch, inch and a quarter. And there's a little guide on the side that gives you the indication of how big that is. When you put the slab through the slab roller, you're going to want to test out and see if it'll push it through, okay? And it's stretching the clay and making it smooth and combining it. So I just like to do it slowly so it doesn't put too much pressure on the gears. A couple turns and then stretch it out. So sometimes when the clay is sticky, it sticks to the pad and bunches up. If you have a newer slab roller, this is not going to happen for you. So I've got my 1/2 inch slab, and it's a pretty big slab. This is probably about a 2-foot slab by 1.5 foot slab. So it's a fairly large mass. I can make it smaller, okay? This is our negative form that we prepared a little earlier. I added 1 extra piece here to make the snout pop out a little bit more, okay? Now I'm going to take my slab and I'm going to put it on here, and I want to do that without ripping the clay. So I'm going to take my negative form and I'm going to flip it upside down on top of my slab, and then I'm going to put my board also upside down on top of the slab. And then I'm going to do the old flip the pancake over, and hopefully it fits pretty well. Okay, now this is a really important step. If you put a lot of pressure on anything, you're going to extenuate any kind of possible breaks that you don't want to have. So you want to really pay attention to when you start to mold it down over the face, that you want to be very careful. Okay, now you can see I have more clay than I need, and that's okay. I'm going to need some for the ears and for the horns and things like that. So I'm probably going to have to take some of those pieces off anyways, and then I'll add those for the other parts. I want to go right into figuring out where are my eyes, where is the snout of the goat there, and I want to start to define that. If you get a good base, especially sort of the eye sockets and the nose and the muzzle, it'll give you a good base as you go forward. So I kind of built in my negative form, kind of already have a little bit of a space for the eye sockets and things. Okay, so next step, I'm going to take a fettling knife and I'm going to go ahead and I want to remove some clay, but I want to be careful about where I do it, because I want to make sure that I don't mess up the bottom of my mask. I'm going to start on the bottom. I'm going to remove a little bit of clay from there. So another tool that I like to use is this paddle. This is very nice to kind of controls, it's a forming paddle. It kind of controls the way the clay moves. First thing I want to figure out is, what is this goat's muzzle really about? And so I know that it's fairly thin down there, so I have to kind of adjust that. I also want to bring the eye sockets down a little bit. It was a little bit too high. So right off, I'm going to make some real quick adjustments. Up towards the top of the head, I'm also going to remove some of this clay. And like I say, I'm going to be adding it back in when I put the ears and the horns in. I'll put that clay off to the side, and I'll probably reuse that same clay to make the ears and the horns. I want to go ahead, and I've got newspaper under here, so I know I can put some pressure on there, but I want to get that muzzle or that nose going first. Okay, I'm going to bring that socket in. All right, so I like to define that form first thing. Okay, now when I'm looking at this, I'm finding that the forehead is a little bit lacking. I would like to have a little bit more. So now I can tuck in some newspaper in behind. And this often happens when students are doing this for the first time. They're sometimes their forms, they don't put enough newspaper, so you can come back in. And you want to be careful, again, not to get a rip on any part of that, okay? All right, so there's my primary part of my form. Okay, now, when I go to form, I like to use a wood modeling tool. A wood modeling tool is one of the best tools to get your initial forms. It allows you to figure out exactly where there's sort of a break between where the nose or muzzle into the cheek. So this stage of the clay is sort of, the clay is a wet stage, and the wet stage, of course, is the stage where you're really kind of getting your fundamental forms down, okay? So what I want to pay attention to is, what is the cheek, what is the muzzle, where are there dips, okay? And make those changes now, because as the clay gets to sort of what we call leather hard, which would be the next stage, the clay is going to sort of take that form and it'll be more defined. The next stage will be more of the detail stuff. This stage is more of just the overall form. What does it look like? How does it move through space? Another really useful tool is the metal scraper. I like the metal scraper because it allows you to get some forms even. So, like right here, some lumps there that need to be shaved off early on. Okay, because like I say, when that clay starts to harden up after a day or two, you're going to start to get, it's going to be more solid. It's not going to want to change too much. Okay. One of the things I find that defines a nose are the nostrils, okay? Where does it breathe out of, okay? And you may have to do this a couple of times to figure out exactly how you want the nostrils. Oftentimes they're a little open, and I like to tilt them up a little bit. So this type of a thing allows me to kind of get them. And then you want to work on the symmetry of those two. So when you make the second nostril, it's going to be similar or the same. So usually start with one, get that right. All right, so one of the things I'm finding with my goat is that my chin is too long, and so I'm gonna curve it out. So in this case, I want to remove a little newspaper or compress it, okay? Because I want to bring this in and bring it in down more. So it's almost like I'm rounding it out right there, and so that brings it down. And I may have to smooth this out. So you have to pay attention that you don't trap the newspaper in there, because you're going to remove that newspaper, and so you want to make it look good when you're done.